Today I'm down in Southern California with arguably the most important product launch for Lexus this year. This is the all-new Lexus RX. The RX started the luxury mid-size crossover segment. It's the best-selling entry here, and it's the most important Lexus arguably available in the US because this is the best-selling Lexus, period, and it accounts for about a third of the entire Lexus portfolio's volume in the US. So it's important that they get this right, not alienate existing customers, but also drive the brand forward. So we find a new design language here and all new drivetrains, 4 new drivetrains to be specific, and 3 of them are going to be hybrids. But before we dive under the hood, let's talk about the design. Brian, what do you think of the look of the new Lexus RX?
Well, Lexus did point out that this is a much more vertical and upright front grille this time around, and I do notice it's very upright, and you've got sort of this unibrow situation going on. They call this the spindle body, or the spindle grille that used to have a pretty pronounced border to it. It's now more integrated with the actual design of the front end and the side, and I think it looks pretty good, especially in these colors where you can see how it starts with the body coloring and it goes down and becomes black. I think it looks pretty nice.
Going in for a closer look, this generation RX is full of optical illusions. It looks to me, upon first glance, that the hood is actually higher than the outgoing model, but Lexus says it's lower, it's just blunter up front. And from a lot of angles, this RX looks smaller than the outgoing model, even though it's almost exactly the same size. Now, there are 2 different basic grills. This is the F Sport grill. There's also the regular grill. Which one do you prefer? I think I like the regular grill better.
I have to agree, because I like how they fade the body color into the grille, whereas here we have a very definite stopping point for the black versus the body color. So I prefer that unique fade situation they have going on with the...
Yeah, this is definitely a lot starker in that difference between black and body color.
This is definitely more traditional Lexus spindle grille. It's still different from what they've been doing, but I do like that new take on it on the regular models.
And I'm surprised the spindle grille has become smaller, because this upper body color section is body color in everything. And even though it still has a cut line right here, so it gives you that spindle effect, in essence, we just have kind of a square grille up front below.
Yeah. And unlike the NX, this sort of wraps around the side a little bit if you're looking at it from this angle. It's a unique take. I do like it a lot, and it does continue that new theme that Toyota's doing with the very pointy, like unibrow up top sort of deal, where the top hangs out on the top like that.
And the regular grille has these individual 3D elements that really gives it a bit of a Mercedes vibe, only on a grand scale, because this grille is pretty darn large and really fades quite nicely from the grille onto the body. I have to say, this is the best looking RX that I think they've designed in a while. Now, the headlights do change a bit, so these are the full LED tri-module headlights. These are available on most trims, but not standard on most trims. And then we have LED fog lights below.
And one thing to note, this is an F Sport handling. You can only get this on the gas 350 model, but if you get the 500 F Sport Performance, this is going to look very similar. However, this trim right here, that's silver, actually becomes black on that model. That's one key way to tell the difference between the two if you're seeing them coming down the road.
And then these grille inserts on the side, these are not functional on this particular trim. As we wrap around the side, you'll see that there are some faux exhaust vents. It's difficult to tell exactly what's going on as far as air plumbing goes. Those may actually be relieving pressure under the hood, but they're certainly not connected to this faux grille on the side. Moving around to the side, we definitely have a different profile than before. The first thing I noticed, no awkward kink in the hood.
Yeah, and you can definitely see how the RX's signature long front overhang is still there, but that grille definitely accentuates it a little bit differently than last generation.
It definitely looks squarer, and this hood is really long.
Yeah, Lexus says they moved the A-pillar back a little bit, so it definitely feels a little bit longer, a little bit flowier, but the overall shape is very recognizable as an RX.
And a little bit first generation Cadillac SRX. This is a little bit long station wagon in a way. In a nod to the outgoing RXL, we find this swoopy little window in the back, but an important thing to know about this generation, there isn't going to be a 3-row model.
And that's because the rumors are pointing towards an all-new dedicated 3-row family crossover that's going to be larger than this, and it's supposed to come out sometime next year.
Yeah, Lexus has been promising that for a while. Let's see if it happens. It's a good thing because the teeny tiny 3rd row in the RXL was always pretty useless. Now, big disclaimer here, we don't know a lot of dimensions on the inside of this RX.
Yeah, we don't know leg room figures, we don't know headroom, we don't know much about the cargo area.
They've only given us one cargo room specification, and that's just with the 2nd row folded. But we do know that the wheelbase is significantly longer than before. It's about a 3-inch stretch or so between the front wheels and the back wheels. I think that's part of why this looks longer and lower than the outgoing model, because they've really pushed the wheels out. That may have some benefits when it comes to legroom. We just don't know.
For this generation, you have your choice of 19-inch wheels all the way up to 21-inch wheels. These are the 21 options. There are other options as well, but they all come with 235 width tires, which is pretty interesting for this to be more of the sporty version.
Moving around to the rear, we find some styling elements from the front duplicated out back.
Yeah, including the way they have this sort of L-shaped swoopiness to the full width taillight bar you've got right here, and you've got the full Lexus name spelled out in the back. That is a new thing for all Lexus models going forward.
And little individual styling elements inside these full LED taillamp modules. Now, it is interesting that we have full LEDs standard in the back, but not full LEDs in the front. If you don't choose that triple LED optional headlight, then the turn signals up front are incandescent. This model has the optional all-wheel drive system and a dealer-available hitch installed.
And Alex, what do you think of the fact that there's just sort of this blank space of black in the center of the bumper? I feel like it's lacking detail or shiny bits.
Yeah, I kind of wish there'd been a little chrome strip somewhere, maybe on the top or something like that to help break up that piece of black plastic there, but we do have little squiggles on each side.
And the nice thing is we also don't have fake exhaust vents or anything like that. We do have this mesh finish, as he mentioned. The exhaust pipes themselves are hidden underneath.
But these exhaust or I guess aero treatment thingies right here on the side of the bumper, those are also imitation, no actual functions being performed by them. As we've all come to expect from Lexus, the RX is going to come with a ton of driver assistance tech standard. Adaptive cruise control, lane departure warning, and lane departure prevention. We also have evasive steering assist, pedestrian detection, oncoming vehicle detection, intersection, junction assist, etc. If you want a low-speed, hands-free driving system, that is available on the RX, but it's not standard. It bundles a driver attention monitoring system with the ability to do all the steering inputs for you below 25 miles an hour. So pretty different than the teammate system that we find on the Lexus LS, but logically it's going to be less expensive on the RX. If you do a lot of stop and go traffic, that might be pretty handy, but if you do a lot of open highway driving, don't bother with that option. It's not going to do anything above 25 miles an hour. Perhaps the biggest change for this generation of RX is the engine lineup, and it may offend some Lexus traditionalists because there's no longer a V6 engine available at any price. The standard engine is going to be this engine, a 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, also shared with the Lexus NX and the Toyota Crown. We're going to see this engine spreading across a number of Toyota and Lexus vehicles over the next few years. This produces less horsepower than the outgoing V6, but considerably more torque at lower RPMs. 275 horsepower, 317 pound-feet of torque. Now you should know that this week Lexus has changed the power output figures of this engine twice on the spec sheet, so if the numbers on the side of your screen are different than the ones coming out of my mouth, you want to pay attention to the ones on the side of your screen because they are subject to change. This engine is mated to a standard 8-speed automatic transmission and your choice of front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. This is the only engine that will give you a front-wheel drive Lexus RX. Everything else is going to be all-wheel drive. 0 to 60 times will range between 7.4 to 7.2 seconds, which is pretty similar to a lot of the base competition, except for some of the European models, which are definitely going to be a little bit swifter. If you're interested in a hybrid, there are going to be 3 different hybrid systems available, with and without a plug, ranging from 246 horsepower on up to 366 horsepower. If you want to know more about those, be sure and check out the video on the RX hybrid lineup that's coming up soon. You'll get up to 36 miles per gallon if you choose one of those hybrid options. Over a day of mixed driving, I found the front seats to be pretty comfortable. We have a 2-way lumbar support for the driver and the front passenger, 3-position memory over here for the driver only, and a power memory-linked tilt telescopic steering column. One weird twist, they did have a European market Lexus RX for display here today. It's the plug-in hybrid model, and it had a power extending thigh cushion and 4-way lumbar support. It also had memory settings for the passenger. At this point in time, it does not appear that that seat design is coming to America, but it may always happen later. Even the top-end trims of the RX 500H that I was driving, it had this exact same power seat. Hopefully by the time you're watching this video, Lexus will have released some legroom and headroom figures. At the time that I'm recording this, I have neither. Although it does appear that this is a little bit more spacious than the outgoing model, or at least it feels like it's a bit roomier and a bit better packaged. With the longer greenhouse, you'll definitely notice that the dashboard is certainly further away than the outgoing model, really lending to the sense of spaciousness that we find here. With this front seat adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, I have about 5 inches of legroom left, and this has a wider bench seat in the back than something like the BMW X3 or GLC. Those are going to be in the same price range as the Lexus RX, depending on exactly how you have them configured, and you're certainly going to find more room in here. So if you frequently find yourself putting larger passengers in the back or child seats if you have young children, etc., this is going to be a lot more spacious than those compact luxury crossovers that you might want to cross shop, like a Volvo XC60. Now, one thing to keep in mind, you can get this without a sunroof, with a small standard size sunroof, or with this large panoramic unit. And if you get the panoramic unit, it does cut down on rear seat headroom. I only have about ½ an inch of headroom left here. You will get more if you get that standard sunroof. The rear seats have a recline mechanism. In this model, it is manual. There's a pretty decent amount of recline. You can also put the seats in a very upright position to square off that cargo area. And the top end trims are going to have a power reclining second row, which is a nice touch. We have USB-C ports back here and 3-zone automatic climate control. Now let's take a look around the interior. I decided to pick a lighter colored model so that way it's a little bit easier to see some details. This model also has the standard size moonroof rather than the panoramic moonroof, so you can see the difference in rear seat headroom. It definitely bumps back up there to give the rear seat passengers a bit more room. This particular model has the optional leather upholstery. Imitation leather is standard on the RX. You pay extra for the leather upholstery. And this particular interior is sort of a tri-tone theme. The armrest right over here is brown. It's not charcoal like the rest of the door. You can see that we still have the same sort of electronic release door latches that we find in the Lexus NX. That coordinates with the blind spot monitoring system and rear cross traffic detection to keep you from opening the door if somebody is coming up against the vehicle, say a bicycle or a vehicle if you're parallel parked, etc. You can see that we have the lighter section of that leather or stitched material right there at the top of the door. Lexus has not been specific as to whether or not that is actually a leather insert. I suspect it is probably new Lux that matches the leather upholstery. That continues in an arc around the dashboards. This definitely has a very different style than the outgoing RX. If you get the RX with imitation suede, then that white section turns into the imitation suede section. There's less wood trim going on in here than in previous generations of the RX. There's just this one band over here on the passenger side, and then 2 panels right here in the center. Then we have 3 inserts on the steering wheel, 2 down below, 1 up top. No wood trim on the doors, no wood trim on the rear doors either. On the passenger side, we have a pretty large bin-style glove compartment. Lots of soft touch materials here, so soft touch lower section, soft touch upper section of the dashboard, etc. There again is that wood trim piece right there. In the middle of everything, we have a large 14-inch touchscreen in this model. If you get the base trim of the RX, then we get a significantly smaller display. It's really just positioned between these 2 knobs. One cool touch with this bigger display is that we have a little LCD right there inside the knob. It's actually the exact same LCD. The knob is just sitting right there on top of it so that we can see the temperature through there. We also have standard heated and ventilated seats in all models. Nice touch. Ventilated rear seats are available. Down here we have the autonomous parking button, 360-degree camera view button, 2 large air vents there, and then 2 USB charge-only ports. Behind this little trim panel, we find the Qi wireless charging mat, 2 USB ports there. One is the USB interface port for the system for wired CarPlay. 2 pretty large cup holders here, a joystick-style shifter, and since this interior is the hybrid model, we have the EV mode button there, but other than that, it's really basically the same as the regular RX. Between the front seats, we have a padded center armrest. It opens from either side to reveal a pretty large storage area. Then moving back over to the driver's side, we have a heads-up display that's available. It is a color heads-up display. And then below that, we find a surprisingly small 7-inch LCD instrument cluster. It's flanked by digital gauges that are just LEDs for the fuel level and the engine temperature on either side. This display is surprisingly small in this segment, where most of the competition has a standard or an optional 12 or even larger LCD instrument cluster. Moving out from there, we find the 3-spoke steering wheel that you saw earlier. Again, wood sections down there. These are touch-sensitive buttons and contextual buttons on either side. So the button module on the left can act as track forward, backward, phone buttons. The one on the right is primarily for the adaptive cruise control system, but it also adjusts the heads-up display, and then you use this button right here to change its function and do some other system functions with it. For instance, the mode for the driving assistance system. Same thing happens over here. By pressing this button, it can turn into an audio button and a mode button as well. On the back of the steering wheel, we have paddle shifters, and then on this side of the instrument panel, you can see that we have those seat memory buttons in order to get official driving specifications like 0 to 60 and 60 to 0, but Lexus has provided us with a little bit of guidance as far as those numbers. They say that the front-wheel drive version of the turbo model is going to do 0 to 60 in 7.4, this all-wheel drive model in 7.2. I expect that the 60 to 0 stopping distance is going to be a little bit longer than a lot of the Europeans, however, because all versions of the RX are going to be well over 4,000 pounds.
And that's after they shed, what, like 170 or so pounds? So they're on the heavier side.
Yeah, apparently the weight figures are going to vary based on which trim you're taking a look at. Turbocharged model versus the base V6, this has the least weight reduction. It's about 50 or 60 pounds or so. The hybrid models lost a lot of weight because it lost a few cylinders.
Right. We don't know the weight of the plug-in hybrid because they didn't give us any information, so it may be even more or less.
But we do know that the RX 500H
F-Sport Performance all-wheel drive.
All-wheel drive. That one is going to be about 4,800 pounds and change. So it's going to be pretty heavy in this segment. I was really surprised by that because a plug-in hybrid XC90 is only going to be about 150 pounds heavier than that model, and it has a much bigger battery pack and a third row. But I think it kind of makes sense because the RX is designed to be the comfy option.
Right, and it definitely still is. I mean, even in this F-Sport, guys, it still seems like the traditional Lexus experience, just a little bit more edge to it. And that's kind of what Lexus was going for, especially in their marketing.
But it's worth noting that even in the edgier for the Lexus RX F Sport, we still have a very comfortable ride. There's a reasonable amount of cushion going on. You'll notice that as you go down the highway, we definitely have that sort of wafting feel that the RX has long had. Out on the open road, you're definitely going to notice the difference in the torque delivery and, of course, the engine note as well. There's a lot of low-end torque, and it really compensates for that slight loss in horsepower.
Yeah, and I definitely think that Lexus purists who really liked that old V6 that Toyota had in all of their products, Lexus and Toyota combined, they're going to miss the buttery smoothness of it. I think this is definitely more coarse, and you can feel the torque for sure, which is nice. You like that additional 50 pound-feet of torque is really, really helpful in the size of this car, but other than that, it's definitely a little bit less refined than the old one.
Yeah, but it's pretty normal for the segment. I mean, everybody's going for a four-cylinder turbo. Some manufacturers exclusively four-cylinder turbo, like Volvo, of course, which they have identified as one of their key competitors. You'll definitely notice lots of low-end grunt, though, and the all-wheel drive system has a nice feel to it in the corners there. This produces so much more torque in the mid RPM band versus the outgoing V6 that climbing hills, etc., it's not going to need to downshift like the old one. So depending on what you're doing, it feels like it has more passing power. It definitely feels peppier around town, but in true 0 to 60 numbers, it's about the same.
And the 8-speed automatic is doing a really good job. I think it's pretty seamless. It doesn't have any hiccups here or there. It just seems pretty normal. And the engine does quiet down, of course, once you're in those higher gears. It's honestly, you can't even tell it's up there.
Yeah, and if you want something that's even smoother than this, there's going to be, of course, the regular hybrid, not the F-Sport Performance all-wheel drive. Yeah, that thing.
Yeah.
That's obviously going to be more like this because it has a 6-speed automatic transmission in it. But if you're looking for that really smooth hybrid system that Lexus has been known for, you'll find that in the regular RX model. When it comes to handling, remember that all models are going to be over 4,000 pounds and all models are going to have 235 width tires.
Yeah, and this is just like the old one in the fact that Lexus emphasized comfort and a soft ride. This is still a bit sportier, but still focused on the ride and the sort of the comfort of it all over the handling. There are other options in the segment that will definitely out-handle this for sure.
But surprisingly, this is now going to be one of the quietest. We've really noticed that out here. I've been very impressed with how quiet it is. And Lexus didn't even have to do things like rear laminated glass to make it this quiet. Only the front windows are laminated. Kind of an interesting handling twist. Only the F-Sport models are going to have the adaptive suspension system. You can't get it in the regular model.
Unfortunately, however, we've gone through the settings and there's really just two, sport and normal.
And there's an eco mode too, but obviously for the suspension it's just sport. And no button. Now it's entirely through the infotainment system. I can't say that I have felt an enormous difference.
No, I don't. And I actually find it interesting that for the F-Sport model, they didn't give it a dedicated button for those changes, but it's all, like you said, in the infotainment system. So you kind of have to go look for it.
One interesting twist when it comes to handling, the RX 500H is going to get rear wheel steer, one of the very few Lexus models to ever get that feature.
Yeah, and I believe it turns 4 degrees in either direction, you know, same direction as the front wheels at high speeds, opposite direction at low speeds to help with those maneuvers.
Yeah, and it'll actually reduce your turning radius for parking lot maneuvers and help improve handling. So on that model, it is still heavy and it does still have narrow tires, but it has some extra tech to try and help mitigate that. It also, of course, has that more powerful electric rear axle versus the regular hybrid model. Obviously, we don't know about fuel economy just yet, but according to the EPA, this should be between 24 and 25 miles per gallon. I believe it. It seems like this engine's been pretty decent in the Lexus NX.
Yeah, and this is, of course, a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, so, you know, it's going to be a little bit less than that. The one that I'm excited about is that 500H F Sport Performance all-wheel drive, because they said that one will be 27 miles per gallon combined. We'll see if that actually pays off in the real world, but That's a decent figure. It's not class leading by any means, but
If you want class leading, that would be the regular hybrid Lexus RX, which will get you up to 36 miles per gallon combined. So pretty decent bump over the model we're driving here. And Lexus claims that the regular hybrid is going to have pretty similar performance to the front-wheel drive base turbo model as far as 0 to 60 times go. I think that Lexus has done a good job trying to balance priorities with the RX. Obviously, the customer interested in this is looking for something that's a little bit bigger, a little bit more comfortable, a little bit quieter out on the open highway, more of a highway cruiser than a canyon carver.
now generally competitors in this segment, the mid-size luxury crossover segment, they do emphasize comfort over handling. Now some do a little bit more, some do a little bit less. This is a nice balance, I would say.
And if you want something that's still comfortable but handles better, there's going to be the X5 or the GLE, obviously. But I think that Lexus has done the right thing as far as the target customer for the RX. The RX is the kind of vehicle that's just really easy to live with. The ride is relatively smooth, even on this really poorly paved section of road here. This is the sportiest version in the sportiest mode for the transmission and the suspension, and it's still pretty darn comfortable. This is the kind of vehicle that's going to be really easy to spend hours and hours in, say on long road trips, etc., or if you have a long commute.
Yeah, it still remains a very easily recommendable car. There's nothing totally different or unexpected about it. It's a very familiar experience. The only thing that might turn potential buyers away is the new styling up front and around the sides and all that. It's a little bit different, but it's, I don't know, it's the same.
Yeah, it's very similar, yeah. I was surprised how much like the old RX it really drives in terms of the theory of the way that it's tuned. Obviously, it has a different steering feel and a different suspension feel and all of that, but the theme, the mission for it is very, very much like the outgoing RX. Unfortunately, at the moment, comparisons are tricky because I don't know how much the RX is going to cost, and that's a key element of comparisons.
But we do know it will be on sale by the end of this year, so probably around December, and it goes into production in October in both Canada and Japan.
Yeah, and that includes the upcoming RX 500h
F Sport Performance all-wheel drive.
Yeah, that's a really long name. I'm intrigued by that one because it's going to be in production at the exact same time as this. But if you want to know more about the hybrid, the plug-in hybrid, and the 500
F Sport Performance
yeah,
all-wheel
that
drive.
thing. Want to know about that thing? That's going to be in a separate video. This is obviously going to be the bulk of sales, according to Lexus.
And seeing that this is the base engine now, the gas-only model, what does the competition look like in terms of what they offer at the base level?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I expect this is probably going to be around $50,000, so probably pretty similar to the X5, the GLE, and the Acura MDX in terms of base price. But what's unusual about most of the competition is that they either are 3-row standard, like the XC90, which they said was a direct competitor, and the MDX, or they're 3 rows optional, like in the GLE and X5. So is that really a competitor to a now 2-row only RX? I'm not entirely sure.
Then there's also that Lincoln Nautilus, don't forget about that one.
That's true, and the Lincoln Nautilus is probably the most like the RX currently available.
Especially in the shape. They're very similar shaped vehicles, very close in size. You can't get any hybrids for that one though.
It's a little bit squarer in the back than this.
Yeah.
On the inside, I'm not sure how it's going to really compare because again, no direct numbers as far as legroom or cargo room figures. Would you buy the Lincoln or would you buy this? Do you like the look of the Lincoln or do you like the look of the Lexus?
I actually really like the look of the Lexus, and if you know me, you know that I'm not going to pick the car that's, what, 8 years old now. I like the fresh new things, so I would automatically go for the RX, and I think it has the chops to deserve my my praise in that way.
So you like the styling of the tail lamp and headlamp arrangements here?
I really do. I liked it in photos, and I do like it in person too. The one thing I will point out, and this may be a point of contention, but I think this looks very similar to the upcoming electric Nissan Ariya. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there you go. A millennial that would buy a new Lexus RX. I think that's a first time. At any rate, if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, be sure and do that. And of course, check out the hybrid video. You'll find a plug-in hybrid video on evbuyersguide.com. And where can they find us on Facebook and Twitters and the Instagrams?
At Alex on Autos, and on TikTok it's now at Auto Buyers Guide. Or is it
That's
the
true.
Auto Buyers Guide? There's a "the" in there as well, I think.
You know, I think
you'll find
I don't
us.
know. You'll
We're on
find
there.
us. Yep. See all of you later.